Hello and welcome. Hello and welcome.
My name is Mark Tyoxin. And this is the Waldorf School of Atlanta podcast.
This is the Waldorf School of Atlanta podcast.
With me today is Waldorf parent Kimberly.
Hello.
Thank you for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's start from sort of the very beginning. How did you first hear about Waldorf education?
When my oldest was going into first grade, we were furiously looking for a school that fit him, and I was getting ready. I was preparing to homeschool him because we just couldn't find the right school. And a friend of ours asked if we had heard of Waldorf.
I hear all them, but that's amazing. A friend told you about Waldorf.
Yes.
Okay. Can I ask you, what about your child made you decide that other schools were not ideal for him?
Well, in kindergarten, there just seemed to be a lot of pressure put on him to, I think most of the pressure was around academia and like reading and having all of these base skills developed at 5 years old so that he could go to first grade. And
What type of kindergarten was he at?
he was at an international kindergarten, so they were a dual immersion school, which is why he was there, because we have a lot of Spanish speakers in our family, and felt like it was really important for him to have that base.
Okay. So it was academically, it was kind of a traditional kindergarten where they do try to teach all the academic things as far as reading and beginning math, even some level. And you didn't like that for him. He didn't like that experience.
I just saw a change in his home life, like his personality. He just seemed stressed out. And I was like, you're fine.
You're fine.
You shouldn't be stressed.
Right. Okay. So then your friend told you about Waldorf. And then you took a tour here?
Yeah.
With Stacy.
With Stacy, and it was the middle of the summer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You're the second person that's told me that. So it was the middle of the summer, so there were no students on campus.
Right.
What did that tour sort of consist of? What did you think?
Well, the tour I really vividly remember, and this was a few years back. He's in third grade now, but it seems like ages ago that we did this. What I really remember vividly is hearing how they don't have textbooks and how they learn through their own understanding in a way, and that they create their books based on what they've absorbed during their lesson. And that was really interesting to me, and sort of reversed the process of learning in a way. Was, rather than being fed material, they were being asked to process stories and then extract a lesson from that. And I found that really fascinating, and more intuitive.
Yeah. When you arrived here and you saw the grounds, what were your impressions of the grounds, actually? Because the campus here is different from many campuses.
Yeah, even down to the way the inside of the buildings look. I think the first thing that I noticed when we came onto campus was the smell of the building, actually.
Really?
Yeah, walking in, the smell. There's this very distinct Waldorf smell.
I don't know if that's a benefit or...
Well, I mean, it's like essential oils. And,
okay, yeah.
It's a very warm smell. Yeah, so I noticed that, and then the interiors of every space are what's the word that I'm looking for? Atmospheric. And the campus is beautiful and full of native plants.
Yeah. We are very fortunate with this campus. Obviously, not all, even Waldorf campuses have as much greenery because it's like 6 acres of forest, right?
Yeah.
We do have the main buildings and such, but 6 acres of forest, and a lot of the time is spent outside. On your tour, was it you and your partner or just you?
My partner and I both
Okay.
came.
What do you have? If you can you tell us what they thought?
Well, yes.
Well, sometimes because, one partner brings the other to these sort of things, right? One partner finds the Waldorf School, and then because it's depending on who you guys are, it's sort of outside the mainstream. So
Yeah.
then you kind of have to be like, we're going to check out this one. And it's very different from regular public academic school in that way.
Yeah, I think one of the first things that Fernando is his name noticed was the contrast between the answer we got for how much time do the children spend outdoors. Because across the board we were getting the answer, they're guaranteed 15 minutes of outside playtime. And I was like
prison yard.
a day?
Oh, don't worry, they're guaranteed 15 minutes outside. Guaranteed.
Yeah, but the answer here was so different. It was that they do a lot of their activities outdoors, and so there may be a day where they spend less time indoors than they do outdoors. And that was music to my ears, and I know that he was.
Well, and then especially when you're thinking about your very young child, I mean, you start to think like, okay, I'll give that up sort of older children, I mean, and that's not the case here, but especially your like 5, 6-year-old, you love them to spend as much time outside. And if someone has figured out how to do that, which they have here, that seems like it would be most people's preference for their younger children. And so given that option, it's like, that's amazing. And yes. So then you had the tour, you thought good thoughts.
Yeah, we were really happy, and we felt like, okay, he's going to be able to actually go and be a child at school. And
was there anything when he started? Was there anything that surprised you, or that you were just excited to learn during that first year, as far as how things went?
Okay, so there were two things. The first thing is that he came home singing all the time.
Really?
And he was just singing, and there was just this like joy that I feel like had been restored in him. And maybe I will cry.
No, I know, right? No.
He didn't seem stressed at all anymore. But yeah, he would be just singing, and to me, like that just said so much about what his lived experience during the day was. That's what he was unloading when he came home.
No, I think about it when, there are times when your child is doing an activity and they just are singing to themselves, and it's that like, so especially having your experience, having sent him to a different kindergarten school and seeing the difference.
Yes.
And just that's one thing. Did you have another?
Yeah, the other thing was when I would ask him what he learned, he would look at me very puzzled, and he would say, "No, we don't do that at school. We just play." And
right, like you didn't realize, how much learning is actually going on, but he definitely enjoyed how it was happening.
Yes.
And saw it as play.
He saw it as play, but then he would tell me this elaborate game that they played with Mr. Moreno, and how all of the children kind of had to coordinate and learn these complex rules about this game, and I was like, oh, you didn't learn anything, huh?
What grade is he in now?
He's in third.
Third grade. Okay, so you've been here for a few years. Did he start kindergarten or first grade?
First grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
And actually, now that you're in your third year, what are your thoughts around the part where the teacher moves up with the class every year?
That is one of the greatest gifts of Waldorf, I think. The teachers, so we have two in Waldorf now. We also have a first grader this year.
Oh, wow.
And this is his first year here at Waldorf. But the teacher knows each one of them well enough that, for instance, if there's like a learning difference that's presenting itself, the teacher knows the children well enough to see that and look at it for what it is without feeling like they have to push or just to be mindful of it for a period of time and see, okay, is this normal development or is there actually something going on? Is this going to work itself out? And not only that, but they have, both of my kids like really love their teachers.
Right.
They love them and not in like they do everything I ask and always placate me, but it's like a very genuine rapport that they keep. And I think it's really special for them to have that relationship with an adult who's outside of the family, who also has expectations of them
and boundaries and
yes.
Right. And I was just thinking about this last night or the other day, that for us at least, outside of his two parents, our son, because their teacher is going to spend 8 years with them, and the majority of the day, really over 8 years, except summers and such, like that person, his teacher is like very substantial.
Yeah.
And then I was just thinking, because they go from first grade to 8th grade, and then it just it ends because, everybody moves on, but it's like, that's got to be a big impact on these children, which goes to say also the amount of work and resources that the school invests in selecting the teachers and then training them for every grade moving up. One of the things I like about, like you're saying, and that they can keep an eye on them and sort of see their development, is that the timeline is much longer. So whereas like in traditional school, each teacher just kind of has to last through the year. Right. They just have to get through the year with good or bad students or students they don't like, or any challenges with them. But here, if you're thinking in terms of, I'm going to be with this student over 8 years, and you can see their development, they also don't necessarily have to completely finish their development within each year block.
Yes.
So if they're not completely sort of caught up by the end of first grade, and there are some skills, you can see them catching up or developing those skills further at the beginning of second grade. So you just have a longer timeline the teachers do to view the child's development, versus saying, okay, they did not develop to the point that we need them to in the first year. We are going to mark them, and that's going to kind of follow them the rest.
Yeah.
Right? Excuse me. Actually, when talking to other parents, is there anything specific that you tell them about Waldorf when you're sharing sort of what it is or why you send your child here?
The safety of the community, I think, is a very important aspect in this day and age. We know the families of the kids that they go to school with, because we also, just like the teachers, we have spent now 3 years as parents of classmates. And so, it takes a lot of times, I feel like the 1 year with one teacher and one class is too quick to really like get to know people. And just knowing, hey, after school. I mean, even if it's something as simple as I have a work thing and my partner's also working and neither one of us is going to be able to get to school in time to pick them up. I know that there's a parent in the class who I trust with my kids, you know, and not just one parent, but we know each other well enough that there's a like a community that I think doesn't exist in a lot of spaces in the modern world.
Now, I'll be honest, and when my son began here, I did not consider being as involved in the parent sort of community as I am. And I may be an extreme case, but still, how did that sort of come about for you? Was it just, I mean, you guys have socials. How easy was it? Can you describe sort of that?
Yeah, I think there are two different things to touch on in what you just asked. And the first thing is that parent involvement, I think, is really important here. But the community is tight enough that there's time for each parent to find the way to contribute that suits them best. You know, we all have different strengths. We can't all be like the chair of the marketing committee. We can't all head up fundraisers. But there's a space for everybody. My personal project and contribution comes to class auction projects. I love to.
That's great. Lucky for your class.
I love to be a part of them, and I love to work with the kids and create things for the auction projects. And the other thing is that the teachers really encouraged us. This is the second thing, but the teachers really encouraged us to have play dates and get together outside of school. And at first that encouragement was like, all right, you know, we have friends, we'll get together, we really will. But it is so nice to develop those relationships over time. And they do come from Coffee Wednesdays, they come from being at the Lantern Walk, they come from getting together to create class auction projects. But I feel like I want to be as involved as I can, but I have never felt like there's a lot of pressure, like you have to be here, you have to do this thing. Also, the activities like the holiday fair and the Lantern Walk that are kind of mandatory are also really beautiful and enjoyable. So
some of those things play into what I appreciate about the school is that they do instill a sense of wonder and reverence for these ceremonies that the school has. And you can call it events, but these traditions, right? Whereas for many schools, they don't have any traditions outside of what the holiday is, the national holiday is on the calendar. And I get that they're not allowed to. But there are ways, even just sort of that Waldorf has traditions and ceremonies or events that they do every year, and the children look forward to it, and then the parents end up look forward to it, you know, like the holiday fair or the Lantern Walk. And then even when sort of you age out of that, you kind of think back on it fondly, even if your Lantern Walk was in the freezing cold, and in the dark. So.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's dark when it's the Lantern
Right,
Walk.
that's true.
Yeah, the getting together for these ceremonies and traditions.
Were you at the Michaelmas, this last one?
No, I wasn't able
Okay.
to come to the last Michaelmas one, but the kids love Michaelmas. I love watching the Michaelmas event.
Yeah. I'll make sure we get it on video next year. We'll get everything on video next year. So
Cool.
yeah.
I'm almost like, don't tell everybody the secret.
Well,
everybody will want to come here.
I know. Well, That's part of what we, you know, yes, everybody will want to come here. That's great. What was there anything that surprised you about your feelings towards Waldorf or your experience or during your experience at Waldorf, like that you thought it was going to be one way and then it wasn't, good or bad? You or your partner, if you know anything that your partner has said.
Right. I I just personally try not to have expectations, and
Uh-huh.
so this maybe, I don't know if there was anything that, I mean, I definitely don't feel like there was anything that disappointed me. There were a few moments where I was pensive um, about reading and
Absolutely.
like sort of the normal academic milestones that my friends' kids were like bringing home. And I think that's something that I've spoken with a lot of Waldorf parents about, is that there's this period between like first and second grade where the kids are approaching learning to read in a different way. And you see all your friends' kids and they're like a lot of like they just read earlier as a group, and I think this comes back to the pressure thing. So there was a point during like first, second grade where I was like, oh, he's not really like interested in reading and doesn't really want to read, and I don't even know if he can read. But in third grade that has kind of like really like worked itself out and presented like, oh, they're just not pushing this skill before the kids are authentically like engaging the
Well,
material.
I feel, and I'm going to have to start podcasting with some teachers, people more knowledgeable than just me or parents, really. They lay much more of a foundation to prepare the children for reading before they actually start teaching them reading, along with the sort of philosophical and ideal that developmentally they will absorb and comprehend and really become better readers at a slightly later stage than what is traditionally taught and sort of thrust upon children at such an early age to start reading.
Yeah.
It's the difference between being able to do, and even going into math as well, whereas like, it's the difference between being able to plug numbers into an algorithm and just get the answer versus understanding why the algorithm works in the way it does. So it's the difference between just identifying the letters and the words put together versus really understanding what the words are saying at a deeper level, with sentence structure and everything else. So, and when we look at, again, the longer timeline of our life, taking the time of maybe a year or two to really lay down that foundation and wait for the developmental part of each child to develop, it seems like a very small, short window.
It really is. At the time, I think there's just this like, I remember being at a restaurant with my parents, and our son was like looking at the menu, and my mom was like, well, what does that say? And he was like, I don't know. She was like, no, we'll read that word.
I know.
And there's just this, and I feel like this is really an important lesson for us as modern people living in this society, is that we live with this immediate gratification in most of our lives, and our children's education doesn't have to be that way, where we're just results,
Right.
because there is in all of us this ability to absorb and process the world around us. And that is where wonder comes from. that is where our like authentic affinity to the things that we love, that's where that comes from, just spending time with it and like letting it steep.
With that wonder and what you just said, one of the things that was said a long time ago in one of the like parent meetings for the class was, and this was, I think it was first or second grade, where we were talking about the reading piece and how also you think about, once you know how to read, you kind of can't stop. So once the children learn how to read, all of a sudden they can read everything that's out there. They can read all the dumb billboards. They can read all the graffiti.
Yeah.
So there's this very small window where they are, much more, or they're beginning to learn more about the world, and you can sort of converse with them, have a dialogue with them, but also they're not being cluttered in their heads with sort of all the media, that's just out there as far when you go out in public and things that you may not necessarily need them to read.
Yeah.
And it's very short. And when you sort of, to some degree, trust in the teacher and you know them at that point that they're going to be able to teach them how to read, it's really your own sort of fortitude to realize my child is going to be okay. They are going to learn how to read. This sort of year and a half difference where they may not read at the same level as other children out there. So it's a lot of your own self-work as far as that and trusting it.
Yeah.
And I understand that pressure, never mind just from friends, but also his grandmother was a kindergarten teacher, for like 30 years. So so there is that pressure, like you can't read in like second grade. And then, all of a sudden it like explodes in third grade and going forward. And then you can kind of see how their comprehension is also feasibly better than others. So, yes.
Yeah. Trusting the process, I think, is another like really wonderful thing that that the community here is able to do. And I think some of my apprehensions were soothed by other parents with older kids who also, shared that experience. Like, oh yeah, we worried at first too, but she's like
Right.
doing amazing. She's doing amazing and reads constantly. Or another parent described it to me. He was like, Waldorf, that's the school where they learn how to build a computer before they're allowed to get on one, right?
That's great. With that, one of the things so you and your partner are creatives, and you kind of do that for your work.
Yeah.
So for me and my partner, she's a professional witch. I'm generally a photographer, and I own a kombucha company. So self-employed, and one of the things that we appreciate about the school is the overall sense that it instills, develops, cultivates creativity and sort of really thinking differently about the world than just this is information you plug in, you get this answer out.
Yeah.
Not to belittle other educational pedagogies or programs, that definitely is one of the big draws for us, is because the world is constantly changing. And so I believe that Waldorf really provides for our child one of the best foundations for this constantly changing world, and being able to have your foundation within yourself to navigate it in the way that we sort of need to if we want a person to thrive. Have you had any thoughts in conjunction with that, as far because you guys don't work 9 to 5 traditional jobs all the time? Have you thought about that? What are your thoughts about that around your child and how they will grow up and do things in the world?
I definitely, my partner and I have conversations about that, and how really the way that Waldorf is set up is And let me back up here, because there was a moment during a work day before school started when I was out here on the playground and we were building that deck with Ali.
Oh, great job.
And there was a moment where I was really stressed out about something, and one of the other parents came up and we were talking, and he said something that really stuck with me, and I really believe this, and like say it all the time, because I feel like our job as parents is not to like shape our kids into what we want them to become, but rather to help guide them to know themselves. And that takes a very delicate touch and a lot of space for people to sort of realize who they are. And I think a traditional schooling system doesn't allow for that as much, with all of the information and testing and benchmarks and all of these things, whereas Waldorf gives them a world of information to access. And rather than tests and benchmarks, they are participating in this lived experience. And for us, I think our children knowing who they are and how they fit into a group, and how they relate to the world around them in community and in nature are really the touchstones for becoming individual adults in the world. So I think Waldorf holds that space for them.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe another situation wouldn't. Does that make sense?
That absolutely makes sense. Are there any things your partner has said that you could share with us that they might feel about Waldorf?
Well, at first, okay. At first, my partner, and I'm not trying to throw him under the bus by saying this, but there was, with all of the traditions and sort of, I mean, really, I think being a part of the Waldorf community requires buy-in. Like, you really do have to, like, get on the bus and just go where it's going. And I see that. I could see how it would. There's just this, like, getting into this new culture. There's a very strong culture, and I think that was what he.
Well, it's so different that it does require buy-in to really. It's kind of like so. Most diets work, right, to lose weight and everything else, but you can't mix and match diets. You have to sort of follow one whole program, So Waldorf works, but you kind of have to just follow Waldorf. You can't bring in too many other things at the same time. So this level of buy-in and commitment to it is scary for most people. I mean, we have a hard time committing to anything, I mean, so all of a sudden you're committing to a community and then being a part of a community, which is hard to find at all in general in regular life these days.
Yeah.
Most of our communities oftentimes is just who you work with.
Yeah.
Right? For many people, it's just that's your community, who you work with, and going out from there. So joining this other school community surrounded with your children as the center, and then it's a scary thing to some degree, really.
Yeah, and I think in a society that's really, I think the overarching, in a society that doesn't have a set culture in its schooling systems or in its institutions, I think our institutions have for a lot of political reasons sort of like become acultural.
Mhm.
And so to come to a place that does have a very unique and strong culture, there is a moment where people naturally ask themselves, like, do I belong here?
Yes.
And
I think it's a testament to at least Waldorf School of Atlanta is that our ability to have a strong culture, cultivate a community that is as open and accepting and accepting of challenges within the community as well, and sort of dealing with them as best it can, and not really shying away from much, not shutting things down, but really having everything under with a foundation of communication so that these things can be communicated throughout the community and helps with that acceptance of all forms while maintaining its culture,
yeah.
which is a lot of work, probably very tiring for everybody involved.
Oh my gosh, but they're so amazing. We have
Right,
just
but
like,
that's how relationships are.
yeah,
A lot of work, especially when you have to communicate in them, whether it's two people or a whole community.
yeah, but the reward is like you get to have this community that is so safe. And it's safe for people to bring their different ideas, and it's safe for, even dealing with the pandemic.
Right.
Like, okay, this is what it is. This is what other people are doing. What do we want to do? And the decision that the administration and its advisors made together was so different than the decision that every other institution in the area made, but it worked. And it worked better. I mean, I remember telling friends, oh yeah, our kids are going to
Right.
school full time.
Kind of proudly.
Yeah. And they were like, what do you mean they're going to school full time? Well, they're going outdoors. What about during the winter when it's like 34 degrees outside? They're outside and they don't complain about it either.
Well, and that too, that as well, whereas along with the community and the pandemic times and everything else, one of the things that ran through my head was all of the parents, or I feel like many of the parents are for their children, and that is the reason, as obviously, to be here. But there was a sense of greater community responsibility that I'm not going to send my child to school sick. Like I will, yeah, even at cost to myself, and obviously it costs parents to keep their children home, but it keeps this whole thing running, because if it had spread wildly during the pandemic at school grounds and everything else, then that would have been a problem and we'd have had to shut down the whole thing. But I had the feeling that many parents understood that, like, especially, the classes are so small, you kind of do know all the parents, at least in your class and the overall community, that we're here to make this thing work for our children, and happily, so in the end, like, whatever is going on, I just want my kid here happy, working out with the other children, learning things and all that. And then I am doing whatever I can, and different parents do what they can at different levels to make that happen for the 8 years that we're here. And that is a focus, I feel like, for many parents that send their children here. Along with the sort of part where you're required and it's asked upon you and expected that you're going to participate as a parent. And then also that you realize that here, greater than many other schools, you're allowed to make the school better. Whereas many other schools kind of like really don't want you to do any of that. They don't want you to, they really participate in your child's education.
They don't want you to mess with their system.
Right. They want you to stay out because then also you can't see behind the curtain of what they may or may not be doing.
Yeah, no, and definitely here, I think that parents have the opportunity and the freedom to be as involved as we want to be. And I do feel like there's just this like transparency behind how everything runs here that I know I really appreciate, because it just also like, you know, when they ask you, please, like at the beginning of the pandemic, like if you're sending your child to school, please make sure that you're staying in your pod, that you're not out there in the world with no masks with other people as the pandemic spreads. And, you know, you see that in writing, and it's like a announcement and like notification that you get, and you know that you can really trust that your community is holding that standard for everybody.
Right.
And being able to trust that is, it gives you like not just the peace of mind to trust it, but also like it gives you another reason to like say like, oh, okay, well, this is how we're operating in the world right now. And it's not like we're all connected to one another, and to know that you can trust the whole community to be operating in that connectedness is really special.
Yeah. Finishing up here, what is one or two, but at least one thing that you would tell Waldorf parents that have thoughts about Waldorf but don't really know much about it? What would you sort of share with them?
If you value the innocence of childhood, if you want your child to grow and know themselves, if you want to be a part of a community that is there for each other and safe, then this is a great place. If those things don't matter to you or they're not important to you, then that speaks for itself. And you know,
Then you don't like your children.
But if those things like speak to you in the way that you want your family to live, then this is a great place.
It is a core piece of what is going on here versus something tacked onto the academics, I think.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
And that is what the difference is. Because all schools can tackle academics and, you know, the nuts and bolts of education, but not many actually cultivate the child's development in the way we would like them to be cultivated.
Yeah, in connection with community. Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank you for having me.
And that is the end. We're done.
You're going to edit this, right?
You know, probably not.